The Hancock Church Vision Statement, words that we have chosen together to describe the work that we are doing in response to the call of God, is as follows. Inspired by the life and teachings of Jesus, we are changing the world through love, compassion, and courage. Now, I believe these words to be both aspirational, that is, something we are aspiring to do, but also to be quite literal, something we are already doing. Now, I confess that as your pastor and teacher, I tend to spend more time thinking about the first two of these things, compassion and love. Compassion and love are in every preacher's wheelhouse, after all, and we have lots of well-used tools in our toolboxes to help bring about the embodiment in our lives of love and compassion. But at this moment, I'm feeling led to the third way in which we are changing the world. It is time, I think, for us to ponder the possibilities and the necessities of courage. Was it really just 3 months ago that this new virus was emerging in what was then to us an obscure city in China? It had no name. It was not clear yet what it was or how fast it was moving. But it seemed to us to be clear at that time that it was somebody else's problem. And then it continued to spread, and hotspots around the world appeared in Italy, in Iran, and then the first few cases in the United States. And here in Boston, for a time, we could blame all of our local cases on a single conference. Remember those days? That single gathering of unsuspecting folks. Less than a month ago, some of our political leaders were still describing the virus, which now had a name, and the disease that it causes, COVID-19, as if it were not really an illness at all, but a creation of the media or a single political party. Public health officials and epidemiologists, however, were universal in their insistence that this was, in fact, a real and serious threat to the public health, and that what seemed at the time to us to be extreme measures must now be taken. We are now into our third week of physical distancing. Our economic systems are fraying, and our deeply divided government has somehow managed to come together on a stimulus package to try and blunt some of the pain of this illness. And those who will still pretend that this is no real emergency need only to talk with our beleaguered medical professionals, our doctors and nurses and technicians standing heroically among the sick in that place where none of the rest of us can be, bringing comfort and compassion and love. By now, I know it is true that some of you hearing my voice this morning have been infected with this virus. And it is even more likely that each of us has someone we know who is infected or about whom we are deeply worried that they are at risk. And suddenly it feels all very close to home indeed. And with this feeling of concern comes another: anxiety. Anxiety is fear when you don't precisely know what you are afraid of. Anxiety is fear before you know exactly how fearful you should truly be. Anxiety is the fear of what if? What if I get this? What if my loved one gets this? What if we must keep this physical distance for another month or 2 or 6 or 12? What if I lose my job? What if I've already lost my job and can't find work? Anxiety is the mental health affliction that comes hand in hand with the coronavirus pandemic. We worry. And then we worry that we may not be worried enough about the right things. And then we worry about whether we are worried about the right things. Anxiety invades our thinking when we are awake and then goes to bed with us. And even when we sleep, it manages to slip and slither even into our dreams. Anxiety, too, is pandemic among us. But blessedly, the treatment for anxiety is known. It is called courage. And the first step toward acquiring courage is to calm yourself. When anxiety comes calling in the form of panic from the television or from insomnia in the darkness, it suggests that the whole world is falling apart and that something must be done, even now, even if all that can be done is to worry even more. And so our first thought when anxiety comes calling must be to calm ourselves. There are any number of strategies for creating calm, some of which are primarily physical abilities. One can choose, for example, to simply draw one's attention to one's breathing, to just sit and watch yourself breathe. Meditation is just an extended form of this, bringing body, mind, and spirit into harmony with the deeper rhythms of life. Exercise is another, a cleansing of stress and the chemicals that stress produces in our minds. We can enter into calmness simply by changing our bodily rhythms. And calm can come in emotional ways too, and conversation being one. We can talk to another person, relying on the strength of our previous relationship, checking our feelings against theirs, and so better assessing whether we are responding appropriately, or whether in fact now is the time for more worry. And of course, prayer, which is simply conversation with God, the one who has seen it all, the one who is our rock and our refuge, our place to stand when everything else is sinking sand. Prayer, too, can alter us and bring us into calm. And there are mental approaches that can bring us into calm, too. My favorite is a decision tree that I stole from someone somewhere. Whenever I find myself thinking about a problem and I feel my anxiety rising, I try to remember to ask myself, is this a real problem? If not, I can let it go. But if it is, then I ask myself, is it my problem? And if not, I can let it go. But if it is, then I ask myself, how important is this? And again, if it's not too important, I can let it go for a time. But if it is important, then I ask myself, is it also urgent? Is it important that I do something about this now? But whether problems are real and mine and important and urgent or not, simply going through the decision tree calms me. And calm is the first step in becoming courageous. In the gospel lesson this morning, we see Jesus first choosing to be calm. He gets word from a messenger that his good friend Lazarus, the brother of his key disciples Mary and Martha, is ill. And Jesus, of all people, knows that Lazarus and Mary and Martha would want for him, out of love for them, to drop everything and go to him immediately. And yet we see Jesus not panicking, not rushing off immediately to see Lazarus, but rather pausing, engaging in some form of self-reflection, and concluding that he need not go immediately. Jesus himself seeks first a calm, quiet space in which he can decide how serious he thinks the problem is and how best to respond. And if Jesus seeks calm, should we not do the same? The second step on the pathway to courage is clarity. Anxiety thrives on muddling things up and then keeping them muddled. Anxiety consists not just in one question, but of many. And each question we ask raises many more. And before you can answer even the first one, the others are clamoring for your attention too. And before you know it, your heart and mind are like the ocean waves rolling, cresting, and crashing on the shore. But when you have achieved some measure of calm, then one can ask one's own questions, not anxieties. Okay, there are a lot of questions out there, and I'm beginning to feel afraid, we might say. But here we are, calm, in the midst of anxiety, and we can ask ourselves our own questions. Who am I? What is my core belief? From where will my help come? The answers to these questions remind us of who we are and of the resources that are available to us. They help us to get clear about ourselves and our lives. Knowing who we are and what our resources are, and remembering these, even in the face of our anxiety, is most encouraging. And again, we see Jesus not panicking over the illness of his friend, but remembering who he was and what his mission was. He was called by God not merely to keep his friends and family happy and healthy. His mission was not to react immediately to the worries of his friends by giving them exactly what they thought they wanted from him. No. A calm Jesus got clear with himself about his mission. He had come to show the love of God for the world, a love more powerful even than death itself. And he would remain steadfast with his mission, even as other voices demanded that he do something else. Lazarus may be dead, he told his disciples, but if so, it's a good thing, because now you are going to see what God can really do. His calm beget clarity. And when we have calmed ourselves and when we have gotten clear about who we are and how we are to live, we are 2/3 of the way toward courage, and the last step is to be connected with one another. Anxiety thrives in the dark, loves to find us alone, wants us to be isolated, wants each of us to be thinking, I alone must fix things. And when we feel alone, we are primed for worry to come in and wash us out to sea. But when we connect with others, when we share our worries with them and listen as they share theirs with us, something wondrous happens. We find ourselves focusing outwardly instead of inwardly. And we find that we are learning from others what was hidden from ourselves. And what we see is that isolation is a prescription for selfishness and disaster. When we connect, anxiety recedes. And oh, do we see Jesus connecting. He comes at last to Bethany and meets Martha and then Mary, and he bears up under the weight of their initial frustration that he had been so long delayed, and instead he sits with them, these two women whom he loved, and he wept with them in shared grief and loss. The disciples and the others who were there saw him weep with them. They saw the depth of his love and compassion, and that having calmed himself, having gotten clear about his mission, and having connected deeply with his loved ones, they saw that in Jesus the synapses were all in place, and that to his love and his compassion he now added courage, complete and strong within him and ready for expression. And it was when his courage was with him at last that he said, "Lazarus, come out." And from 4 days deep in death, Lazarus came out, back into light and life, the death shrouds unrolling from him. Calm, clarity, connection beget courage, which Jesus combined with his love and compassion to bring into action the wondrous and mighty and transforming, world-changing love of God. Hancock Church, cherished friends, what Jesus did, we can do. For he promised to us that all that he had done we would do and more. And so for this reason, even in the midst of our anxiety, we have reason to say and say again, inspired by the life and teachings of Jesus, we are changing the world through love, compassion, and courage. Amen.